All right, guys, welcome back to the garage. September the 1st, 2022. Hard to believe. The Labor Day weekend here is pretty much signaling the end of summer, and the days are going to get a little cooler, and of course it's going to be darker earlier at night. Anyway, we're continuing to work on the 250, hoping that we're going to be able to enjoy it for at least a few weeks before it's got to go away for the winter time. Anyway, we got a small project tonight in the garage. I have a situation where a little spring tab has broken off, and it actually was broken off, and the previous owners made a provision for a new tab that's actually in the wrong location for this spring that is a return spring for the accelerator pedal. So what we're going to do, let me show you that on the 250 so you can see it, what it's supposed to look like. Let me just wander over here. It's nice to have the TR6 here for some show and tell. And you can see the tab here, I think, pretty clearly. You see the little tab there that the spring attaches to? I think you can see that. Maybe I'll go in this way. Anyway, that little tab is broken off on my car, and I need to replicate that in order to attach the spring properly. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to create something here, and we're going to use a little angle driver to screw that into the body of the car. It was welded on there before, but I neglected to weld a new one on. Actually, I didn't even notice that it was broken. The only thing I did notice that the previous owner had put that other tab on there, which I assumed would work. But it doesn't work as well as I'd like, so we're going to fix that, and we're going to create a new tab for that spring to hook onto. That's what they're in the process of doing tonight. Alright, nothing too exciting, but there's my little tab, and we're just about to put it on the car. So I've got my spring here. I think this is the spring we're going to use. So I made sure that it actually fits through the eye on the tab, and that's all good to go. Got my self-toppers ready, so let's get it on the car. Alright, so the new tab is installed. I don't know if you can see that down there or not, but it's looking pretty good. We've got the new spring on there, and the action seems to be pretty good on the accelerator, so happy with that. So it's another little job checked off the list. We'll move on to something else. Alright, welcome back to the garage, the 2nd of September, and we're just about to start another little project. Not one I've been looking forward to, but since the swap back to the Zenith Stromberg carbs from the triple Webers, I now need to recalibrate my air-fuel ratio meter. Right now it's showing an error, it's just flashing green, so that means I need to recalibrate. So I'm running this Innovate Motorsports LC2 digital air-fuel ratio meter, and there's an actual calibration procedure here published, so I'm going to have to go through this procedure that is 3 steps that will entail me having to take the oxygen sensor out of the pipe down below. So that means I'm going to have to jack the car up to get under there to unscrew the sensor, because it has to be in free air to be recalibrated. So we're going to go through that process now, so got to get the car up in the air once again. Alright, the first thing we need to do is to get under the car and remove the oxygen sensor from where it is in the bung in the exhaust below the car. So we've just got the car jacked up on the passenger side here, and we're just about to get under the car. And we've got lots of jack stands under the car and some jacks for safety, so we should be good to go there. I always do a little extra when I'm getting under the car just in case. So anyway, we'll get under there, remove the oxygen sensor, and then we'll get it out into free air, as it says in the manual, and we'll go through the process of doing the recalibration. Alright, good morning. Saturday, September the 3rd, and a bit of a big day today. We've got a professional detailer coming to polish the TR250 today, here to the garage, actually here at about 11 or 12 today. So we're going to give the car a wash in preparation for the guy to appear. So I've got the TR6 out in the driveway. Got them both idling, which is kind of nice to hear them together. I know this camera doesn't pick up sound very well. So anyway, we've got a few swirl marks in the trunk lid and the hood that I want to get out. The actual body panels are not too bad, but we'll see what the professional guy says. The top has not been touched yet, hasn't been sanded even, so I don't know if you'll be able to compound and just swirl remove that. We'll see. I don't think it needs a lot of work as it is, but there's definitely some areas in the back of the car that need a little bit more attention than I'm able to give it. So anyway, we'll see how the car turns out by the end of the day, and should be looking a little bit better even after a good wash. It's pretty dusty. I don't know if you can see that, probably not. Anyway, we'll get the hose out, give her a bath. I don't think I've actually washed this car yet, so I'll come back later on today. All right, we got her all washed up and ready to go for the detailer. Looking pretty good as it is, but we can definitely make it better. So he's on his way and should be here within the next couple of minutes, so I thought I'd just take a real quick video of the car. Now, I doubt you're going to be able to tell any difference than what you see here, but I know I can definitely see some imperfections that I want improved upon, and he's going to be the guy to be able to do that. So anyway, it's looking good, but I think it can look a little bit better. All right, guys, coming up to 2 p.m. and the detailing or the polishing is done, and it's looking fantastic. Just put it over the top. I think there's a few little areas that I couldn't get to as good as I had wanted, and these guys were able to do a little bit better than I could as far as the polishing was concerned. I mean, the one guy had been doing it for 20 years, so that's why I called in the professionals. So looks definitely a much deeper blue than what I started with. Nice reflection. So a 3-step process. They did a swirl remover to begin with, then they did a fine polish, and then they did a sealer. That's looking really good. Don't know how well this is showing up under the lights in the garage, but yeah, it's looking really good. So hopefully I'll be able to maintain this for a few years. Pretty dark on this side, but looking good. The trunk's definitely looking better than it was. I had some areas in the middle here that I wasn't happy with when I was doing it, so I managed to get that looking much better. So yeah. Happy. All right, good morning. It is Sunday, September the 4th, I think. It's the day before Labor Day anyway. And we're back this morning out in the garage just having a look at the TR250. I did start another little project last night. As I'd mentioned previously, the triple Webers that were on the car came off because I was having some tunability issues with them, and I thought I might have some internal problems. So I've started stripping those down in order to rebuild them. I did find an issue with carb number 1 already. It didn't have a throttle return spring, so that was one of the issues I found so far before even looking at the other 2 carburetors. So one issue found, but anyway, we've got them stripped down. We're going to give this a bath this morning in the ultrasonic cleaner, along with the chokes and venturis over here. Got all the parts bagged and tagged separately. We'll rebuild one carb at a time, just so we don't get any parts mixed up or get confused. So that's what we're up to today. Some rebuilding of the Weber DCOEs. All right, Tuesday morning, September the 6th, I believe it is, and we've just got the TR250 warming up. We're on our way to the alignment shop this morning, and the same shop is going to be doing the safety and certification on this car. It's been a long road to this point. Anyway, we've got the trailer ready to go. We're going to pull it in the trailer. Obviously it's not plated. It needs to be safety and certified in order to get a license plate in Ontario. So that's the objective for today, is to actually get a plate on this so we can actually get it on the road and start working the bugs out. So we'll let this warm up, and then we'll pull it into the trailer. And our appointment's at 9:30 this morning. It's about 6 a.m. now, so we've got a little bit of ways to wait, but I want to bring it up to the shop and get it parked in the parking lot, as the parking lot's pretty tight up there, so I want to get it unloaded before it gets too busy. So that's what we're doing today. Wish me luck. Yeah, a little gratuitous shot here with the lights on. I don't know if I've shown the car in the semi-darkness. But obviously all the lights need to work for safety. Looking good. Right, let's get into the trailer. Alright guys, welcome back. Thursday, September the 8th, and we had a good day today. We did manage to get the TR250 aligned. Very nice shop. Very expensive shop, let's just say that, but sometimes you got to pay if you want the job done right, and this was definitely the right place to go. I'll post a snapshot of the setup for the suspension that the shop gave me, a printout off of the alignment computer, so you can see how I've got the car set up. So it's sitting nicely now, and we're just about to put our newly acquired license plates on the car. The rear should be fairly easy. The front will be a little bit more difficult. I'll have to do something custom up there, as we need to run a plate here in Canada on the front, or in Ontario at least on the front. So we'll figure something out to do there. So the car is now legal. Once I get the plates on the car is now legal for the road, so I can start doing some testing and tuning and doing some driving to get this to where I want it to be. So far so good, just having taken it around the block quickly, but there are some bugs to work out for sure. I do have a little bit of a miss going through the RPMs, so I don't know whether that's ignition related or carb related, but we'll figure that out as we go along in the process of debugging this after a 5-year restoration. Anyway, let's get the plates on it, and first trip will probably be to the gas station. It needs gas again. I've probably put gas in it 4 times, about a couple liters at a time, so now we'll actually be able to drive it to the gas station and put more than that in it at one point in time. Alright, let me get the license plates on, and we'll come back with one more update. Alright, here's what I'm going to be using to fit the license plates. It's called the Ultimate Kit, and it's by a company called Cruisers Accessories, and this is supposed to be a kind of a tamper-proof kit that uses a hex key on the stainless steel screws to install the license plate. So it won't be it'll be a little bit more difficult to steal the plates off this car unless you have a hex key handy versus something like just a screwdriver. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and try to utilize this and get the plate here on the rear. As mentioned, it already has the fixing points here. We'll see how those line up with the actual plate. Alright, one of the other things I bought is this silicone license plate surround. You can see the black surround there. There's the part number for it, I believe. But anyway, it's anti-rattle, anti-scratch, and I was worried about scratching the paint, so with this silicone cover, it's actually got the silicone on the back, so when it hits the car, it's not going to touch the actual paint itself. So that's good. That's what I was looking for. So we'll go ahead and we'll apply that and see how we do, and we'll give it a look once we're done. Yeah, this little kit here is working out pretty well. So we have this little threaded piece that goes up inside the car from below and fits in the hole nicely. And then we've got a little another little buffer that we can put as a cap on top of this on the outside, and then screw the stainless screws through that. So getting a little bit more of a standoff of the plate against the paint, so that seems to be working out pretty well. Alright, Friday, September 9th in the PM after work, and we're out here tinkering on the car, starting to try to do some bug fixing. And the first bug that I have is with, I believe, either the ignition or the carburetors, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Alright, so here's the first gremlin that I'm going to be trying to fix today and over the weekend. I haven't had a lot of opportunity to drive the car, but I have driven around the block and in a couple of parking lots. And I've got a bit of a hesitation going on through the RPM range. I'm going to say it's more of a miss, not necessarily a hesitation. So I've got a miss basically going through the RPM range. So I'm trying to figure out whether that's carburetor related or ignition related. And I've done some things to see if it makes a difference. For example, I've changed my distributor out from the one I'm running here currently with the Petronics ignition. I've swapped it back for the Delco distributor that came in the car to me with the points ignition in it, and there's no difference. So that's not a distributor issue, I don't believe. It possibly might be a carburetor issue. And before we get to the carburetors, let's talk about, I did a few other things, like checked for vacuum leaks, for example. I've got a propane torch over here. The way I normally check for propane leaks is when the car is running, I just open the valve on the propane torch and sort of flash it around all of the intake manifold and look for vacuum leaks. If the car increases in idle speed, then that pretty well gives you a determination that you've got a vacuum leak somewhere. So I didn't find any vacuum leaks, so I'm running on to the next thing, which is basically the carburetors. So as you know, I rebuilt these carburetors and I've put them on this stock manifold. Now the carburetors are not the correct year for this car, but they should operate. But apparently they're having a bit of an issue. Well, I'm thinking they're having a bit of an issue, and I might be attributing that to the intake manifold. As we discussed earlier, in order to get this intake manifold to fit with the aftermarket header that I'm running, I had to take the coolant passages, or the coolant that normally runs through the intake manifold, I had to take that out of the equation and cap those fittings off, because the nipples on the end of the manifold were actually interfering with the fit of the header, or vice versa. Regardless, the manifold would not drop down in position against the head, and because those nipples were in the way. So I removed the nipples, which essentially meant that I couldn't run coolant through here. Now what I think is happening is the manifold is, or the intake manifold is so close to the exhaust manifold, and we're talking like millimeters in certain areas. I think what's happening is it's heating up that manifold significantly, that it might be vaporizing the fuel as it goes through it. The bottoms of the carburetors themselves actually seem to stay fairly cool, but when I put my hand on the intake manifold, it's extremely hot. So I think that might be part of the issue with the rough running or the miss. So what we're going to do, believe it or not, is we're going to go back to the Weber carburetors. Now I think there might be some video preceding this little segment here about me taking apart the DCOE carburetors that I had installed in the car previously for a complete overhaul and rebuild. So over the past week and a half or so, I've been working on that project, and the Webers have now been rebuilt fully. I did find some issues internally with them. Those have been fixed. The float levels were way off in all three of the carburetors, like way off. So I'm sure that was contributing to the bad running of the Webers that were on the car. So that, and combined with the fact now that I have a new manifold, so I've picked this Canon manifold up, which is correct for the car with the narrow ports, so it's for an earlier TR250 or earlier TR6. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this manifold, or we're going to try to use this manifold versus the individual manifolds that I had on before, which were a bit of a sort of a homemade sort of a setup as far as the linkages were concerned. I actually even think the manifold itself might have been homemade. But we're going to try to get the carbs reassembled on the single manifold. I like the idea of the single manifold better because there's less chance for the linkage to bind. With the single manifolds, you could sort of cant them a little bit here and there, and it would sort of make the linkage bind. Obviously, with the joined manifold, that's going to get rid of that situation. So it should make the carburetors run a little bit better or be a little bit smoother as far as the linkage is concerned. So we have yet to see if that is going to be the fact or not, but that is what we're up to. We're going to remove the Stromberg carburetors again, and we are going to attempt to reinstall the Weber DCOEs and get the linkage hooked up in some way, shape, or form with this entirely new manifold as opposed to the single manifolds that were on there. Alright, the mosquitoes are bad in the garage tonight. I'm being eaten alive, and there's a lot of me to eat. Anyway, the first thing we need to do in this project is to remove the stock Zenith carburetors that we've only had on there for a few weeks' time. But we're going to see if this solves the problem by putting the DCOEs that came on this car back on. So we're going to start the process of removing the stock carbs and the manifold, and we also found another little bit of an issue that we need to resolve with the header clearance on the bottom frame rail. It's actually touching the bottom frame rail, and that might be because I've got a heavy-duty triple layered gasket, intake and exhaust manifold gasket on this car, and I may want to go down to a single manifold gasket, which will give me a little bit more clearance on the frame with the header and keep it from rattling down there. I don't want to get the ball peen hammer out just yet, but we will if we have to. I don't want to blow my own horn, but I'm pretty good at taking carbs off and putting them back on quickly anyway. So carbs are off, and looks like the actual intake manifold was rubbing on the header. You can see this little shiny spot here. It's actually dented the header a little bit. So I've got a corresponding spot on the bottom of the manifold. So it's possible that manifold might not have been seating down as far as I'd like it on the, particularly probably on that center section, although it did dent it down pretty good. But anyway, regardless of that, we've removed one of the gaskets from there. So we had a double gasket on. We're going to take it down to a single gasket, and that again was primarily because I was having some problems with clearance down here with the header on the frame rail. You can see how tight it is there, and by moving that in just a millimeter, I think I've got a little bit of clearance now. Clearance. Anyway, on to checking the dry fit of the new intake manifold to see if that's actually going to fit on there with that pace setter header. Alright, we installed the new to me Canon manifold, and it looks like we've got good clearance. It is tight again on both sides of the header, on the outside and inside of the header, but we just slipped a piece of paper in here to make sure that we have clearance all the way around, and it does look like it can drop down all the way without pinching the paper, so I'm assuming that means I've got clearance there to get that in there. However, I'm thinking I'm going to take a little step backwards here, and we may not go ahead and install this new manifold right now. We may actually just use the existing manifold, and here is the existing manifold. I remember I was telling you that it was in 3 separate individual pieces, and the reason why I'm thinking of using this, at least temporarily, just to put the Webers back on the car to see if they're going to work any better than they did before, is that we already have a throttle linkage up and working for this particular manifold, so I would not have to create something from scratch, which may slow me down for a number of days. So I'm thinking we may put this manifold on hold, and that might become a winter project if I can get the Webers up and running to how I want them to run. So I'm thinking that we may just attempt to reinstall with the old manifolds first, because I know that I've got a throttle linkage that works. I know that I actually have a linkage bar assembly that works with the carburetors. So I think we might step backwards and go with the old original setup initially, at least, just to get the Webers on and see if we fix the running issues with them. Hopefully that makes sense. Alright guys, end of night update just coming up to 10 p.m. and as you can see we've got the carburetors back on the manifolds, and they're just bolted in there loosely just for show. And we'll continue on tomorrow figuring out the linkages, getting them back to where I had them before, and with some improvements added on to that as well, and we'll talk a bit more about that when I get into the video tomorrow. One sort of critical thing these carburetors were missing was an ability to individually adjust them. There were no idle adjustment screws on each carburetor. There was only one master idle, which was on the far carb, and that was not going to work for me. So we've got to do a little bit of work tomorrow to figure out how we're going to do individual idle controls for each of these carbs. I think I can do it by pirating a few pieces off of my Webers from my TR3. So we took a couple of the throttle levers off here that we'll put into use on the DCOE 40s on the 250. Anyway, we'll get into that tomorrow. I'm tired. I'll be out here tomorrow. We'll see you then. Alright, now Saturday morning about 8 a.m. and back on the TR250. Hoping to get these carbs up and running later today. So we're back at it this morning to make that happen. So we're going to start playing around, I think, with doing the rest of the hookups and trying to figure out what we're going to do as far as the throttle linkage is concerned to make it have an actual throttle stop, an adjustable throttle stop, which these carbs didn't have independently. They only had one throttle stop on the end carb that was manipulating all 3 carbs only when the top linkage was connected, and that's not how you're going to be able to set these up accurately. So we want to have individual throttle stops, or idle screws if you want to call them, set up for these carbs. So we're endeavoring to do that now. So we're going to take the carbs back off, play around with them a little bit with the throttle levers on this side of the carb. So I've got a throttle lever here, single, and then I've got a double here, one for each carb here, that we need to play around with a little bit. So that's what the plan is. We'll hope to have this up and running, like I said, early afternoon or possibly by the end of the day if we run into any issues. Alright, let's get crack-a-lackin'. Alright, the Webers are reinstalled and we have them initially set for our first startup. So the idle screws are out a half a turn on each carburetor, and the mixture screws are out one full turn on each of the mixture screws, each of the 6 mixture screws. There's a mixture screw for each barrel. So those are set. The linkage is disconnected, so we should be good to go for a first start. Choke cables are not connected, so I'm going to try to attempt to start it without the choke. So that might be a little bit difficult, but we'll give it a shot. So we'll turn the fuel on. I'm not going to film this. It's going to take a little bit of tinkering around, but we'll come back when it's running. If it's running, we'll come back and we'll shoot a bit more video. Alright, we're back up and running, and we've got the initial settings done. And it seems to be idling pretty well. We've got it balanced between the carbs, and we think we have the mixture set. Although I'm not getting much of a reaction on the first carb as I am on the second and third carb when I turn the mixture needles. But anyway, it's idling just where it should be, just about 900. So I think what we'll try to do now is we'll connect up the throttle linkage, and we'll see how we do once everything is hooked up. I'm taking it for a test drive. We're okay. Go for it. Alright, we're out for our first official drive in the TR250. Things are going pretty well so far. Seems to be running not too bad. The Webers still need to be tuned a little bit, especially off idle. Mid-range, they seem to be pretty good. Car's pulling pretty well. The exhaust sounds amazing. The air-fuel ratio looks pretty good. I'll just flip down here in a minute. Small issues to report. First of all, our overdrive is not operating as it should. It was working when I initially put it into second, and then it's quit since then, so got a little bit of an issue with the overdrive to figure out. Other than that, though, it seems to be pretty good so far. So we're just enjoying the drive this morning and listening to that exhaust sound. I don't think you can hear it in the camera. We'll give it a shot here once we get over this crest. We're going to be catching up to some cyclists here on the right-hand side. Definitely pulls hard. Alright now guys, Monday after work, and we're back out in the garage tinkering around. So yesterday we had a pretty successful day testing the car on its first drive with the triple Webers, and as mentioned, we did have a little bit of drivability issue with the car wanting to bog a little bit out of the hole, but going through second, third, and fourth, the car seemed to run pretty well up through the high RPMs, so I was quite happy with that. So the only reason I'm going to be playing around today is I've decided to figure out why the Zenith Stromberg carburetors that were on it were not operating very well. So what I've done is I've actually pulled the carburetors off that were on the car, and they were, I think I'd mentioned before that they were probably for like a later car, like a 74 TR6. Well, I happen to have a pair of 71 Zenith Stromberg carbs kicking around that were in bad shape that I decided to rebuild. So I stayed up late last night and rebuilt another set of carburetors, because what I found was when I pulled the carbs off from the ones that were on there, the 74s, I found that when I was starting to take them apart, because what I was going to do was just do some internal checking and make sure that the floats were actually at the correct level. And what I found was that the little stake that holds the float in place had actually detached from the carb body, so the floats essentially were floating. So obviously that would be not a great situation. So unfortunately those carbs can't be fixed, I don't believe. I'll have to do some research, but getting that little stake that holds the float staked back in there is going to be problematic. Anyway, I went ahead and, long story short, rebuilt these carbs. These are from a 71, so they should be a little bit better for this car anyway, since they don't have the float chamber vent on the side, so I won't even have to cap those off. So the reason I'm swapping these now is I want to check the drivability between the Webers and the Zenith Strombergs. If I decide to keep the Zenith Strombergs, that means I then need to do some additional plumbing from the valve cover into this vacuum line going to the brake booster to have to put a T in there. So before I do any modifications to that booster line, I wanted to swap the Zenith Strombergs out and see how the car performs with the Zenith Strombergs before I make some irreversible changes, let's say. So that's what we're up to tonight. We're going to swap back to Zenith Strombergs and see how it runs with the 71 set. Alright, end of day report. Dark outside, but we got it back up and running on the Strombergs, and they seem to be running pretty well. So I'll take it out for a road test as soon as we got a good weather day. I don't know if it's going to be good. Monday today, not great. I don't think the forecast is really good for Tuesday, Wednesday. It looks like I'm going to be busy at work anyway, so I won't be able to get out here at night. So it's possible Thursday might be the first test day, and we'll see how they work then. Running out of time, I've got to make a decision on whether I'm going to go with these carbs or with the Webers, as I want to get to a show. British Car Day is on Sunday, and then we leave 3 days after for Kentucky for the six-pack trials. So whatever I do, it's got to be soon. Alright guys, we're out in our favorite spot. It is Saturday, September the 17th. It's one day before British Car Day. And some of you have been watching this project and this channel for a while will know that 5 years ago I was attempting to get this project, this 1968 Triumph TR250, to British Car Day. So 5 years later, we're finally going to make it. Tomorrow's the day. So this is coming out. It's a little windy here, so excuse the wind if that's coming through. See a bit of the ghost stripe coming out in the sun. I get out of my shadow. Like the way that turned out. Pretty happy with the project overall. There's a few things that are still not quite right that we're working on. The overdrive, the solenoid is sticking. So it actually is wired correctly and it does engage sometimes, but 90% of the times the solenoid plunger is sticking, so that will mean that I need to replace the solenoid. We've got a small engine oil leak at the front that we're going to be working on to rectify. But other than that, the car is pretty much complete. We are running on the stock Zenith Stromberg carburetors, actually carburetors from a 71. We were running with the Webers, I think on a previous video clip, but we decided to go back with the Zeniths temporarily. We will endeavor to put the Webers back on with the new manifold that I purchased for them. But yeah, very happy with the way the car drives, with the way the car handles, the way the car looks. There's a few things I would probably do differently, but overall very happy. So just a few final thoughts before we end this video, and I thought I'd end with some numbers and dates. So I purchased this car 11 and a half years ago, in March 2011. And this past weekend was the first time in 11 and a half years. 5 years once to do the frame-off restoration of this car, and many of you know that once the paint came off the car and we saw the condition of the body, the timeline was out the window. We originally said we were going to try to do it in 167 days. We started our T- calendar at T167. and right now we are at T plus 1821 days, probably a few more since I wrote these numbers down. This is the 270th video in the series for the TR250, if you look at the playlist. So 270th video. So it took a while to get it done, but I'm happy to say it's finally done. And we're going to be happy to take it to British Car Day tomorrow. And then we'll be taking it down to Lexington, Kentucky next week for the six-pack trials and driving it around down in Kentucky. So we're looking forward to that. To end the video off, I wanted to thank a few people that helped me along the way. Of course, my neighbor Les, who was the first to put grinder to this car. He wanted to, if you go back to one of the first videos, he was one of the first guys to delve into the condition of the bodywork underneath the paint. And we knew we had issues as there was some scabbing and some bubbling of the paint here in this rear quarter. So Les was the first one to break out a grinder and discover what lay beneath. A very small amount of discovery, but foreshadowing, let's say. Really big thank you to Lynn Yakov from Rusty Beauties fame. Lynn's put a lot of time and effort into this car as well, helping me with the wiring, helping me with these hand-formed vent wings. You can go back and look at my videos for those. Fashioned around a wooden buck with a shrinker stretcher. Fantastic workmanship. And also known as the Little Hands Man. Some of those areas that I had trouble getting into, he helped me out with. So big thank you to Lynn, who put quite a bit of time and effort into this car. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the most important contributors to my channel, you, the viewers and subscribers. Thank you very much for all of the kind words and positive comments throughout the past 5 years on this project. Some of those dark days, cold days out in the garage, you inspired me to get out there and continue on with the project. There were challenges to overcome, like there are with any project. I try to share those with you. You got me through them. So thanks very much for all your comments, all your views, and all your subscriptions. I guess we'll end this video here. We'll take some at British Car Day tomorrow, but I'll upload this video and we'll start a fresh video for tomorrow. So thanks again, and we'll see you on the next video. We'll put an end to the restoration project, we'll call it, and we'll just continue on with the tinkering to make this 100%. But as far as the actual restoration of this project, it's now running and driving, licensed and on the road. So I don't think we can consider it a project anymore. Next project up will be the 59 TR3A. We'll be bringing that in the garage this fall. We'll see you then.